So this is our last content for the course for this semester. And I regret to say that in the sense that there's a lot of fun and interesting topics that we unfortunately don't get to. But in this, we are going to kind of tie things up and give a brief overview of what it means when we talk about public choice, which is, of course, part of the title of this course, right? So a classic way to introduce public choice is through the ice cream stand. So let's say there's a boardwalk that runs along a beach. The beach is about a mile long, and you've got an ice cream cart. You can't move it around. You have to pick one place to put it. And you have to figure out where along that boardwalk you want to go. Now, we know a few things. We know that people are more likely to go to an ice cream stand that's close to them than one that's further away from them. So if you're closer to people, they're more likely to know you're there. They're also more likely to willing to say, hey, let's go check out what they have. Let's go buy some ice cream. So we know that people are more likely to go to something closer to them than something further away. Let's also assume that people are evenly distributed along this beach. So perhaps they're social distancing and everyone's doing a nice job. They're staying away for their own health. They want to make sure they're staying at least 6 feet away from everyone else, and that means we end up having people all along this mile of beach that are kind of evenly distributed. Now, where along that boardwalk would you want to set up your ice cream cart? So if you go all the way to, let's say the beach runs north and south, if you go all the way to the south end, you're really close to the people at the south end, but you're a mile away from the people at the north end, right? So you'll do great with those people at the far south end, but you're not going to do very well at all with those people at the north end. Likewise, if you park all the way at the north end, you're going to totally miss out on that crowd at the south end. So where are you going to want to put your stand? You'll want to put it right in the middle, right? You'll want to put it halfway down the boardwalk, and then you have the best chance of getting as many people as possible. The people who are in the middle, they're right there. The people at the south end, they're a ways away, but they're a half a mile, not super far away. Same thing with the people who are at the north end of the beach. They can still see you, right? So the best place to go with your ice cream stand is right in the middle of the beach. That same logic applies to politicians who are trying to get votes. So if instead of selling ice cream, you are a politician and you're trying to get votes, and instead of a beach, we're looking at something of an ideological spectrum. Maybe we'll think of it from left to right, liberal to conservative. Where do you want to park yourself on that spectrum to get as many votes as possible? Well, if you're right in the middle, then people are more likely to be comfortable coming to you with their vote, right? If you're way on one extreme of this ideological spectrum, people who are on the other end are going to say, whoa, that is way too far away for me to be comfortable with. Now, of course, it's more complicated than one politician. There's no election if there's just one person running, right? Well, there are. We see those in authoritarian countries especially, but we don't put much credence in what those votes mean. Contested elections are where the interesting things happen. And so obviously you can't be perfectly in the middle and appealing to people all across that spectrum if there's someone else running against you who is at all different from you. They are going to set up this dynamic where you're each trying to maximize the number of people who are ideologically closer to you. And so you get into a lot of interesting game theory, assuming that your opponent is trying to have the same strategy as you, maximizing people who are closest to you. Where do you want to park yourself on that spectrum? You can actually get that same sort of game set up with 2 ice cream carts along this mile-long boardwalk. And you get into issues like, well, does someone set up first, knowing someone else is coming? Or do they set up at the exact same time? So timing and things matter in these models. Game theory has some really interesting stuff to say about this. But this is the idea of public choice, that we can actually model people like politicians And they're not trying to maximize profit like an ice cream cart or any other business would be doing. Instead, they're maximizing their chance of getting elected. So essentially, maximizing their votes, or again, it's more complicated than that because you don't actually care about getting as many votes as possible. You care about winning with as high a probability as possible. But we can model that. And that's what public choice does. It's thinking about political actors using a maximization model, tools from economics. And we can use that for elections. We can even use that for career people, staff who work in federal agencies or federal judges. They're not facing elections, right? But we can still come up with some kind of objective function. Maybe they're trying to maximize their probability of getting elevated to the next level within the hierarchy of the administration they're in. Some sort of objective function can kind of capture what incentives they're facing to try to do what they personally want to do. That's the idea behind public choice, that we can get some solid predictions about what behavior we'll see out of people in the political landscape if we use tools of economics. In public choice, an important topic that often comes up is something like regulatory capture. So that's this idea that very often agencies and the industries that they regulate are going to end up having somewhat similar incentives. So even though it's set up so that the agency is supposed to be a constraint on the behavior of the industry, we end up with what people call a revolving door. The same people are actually working in both ones. There's prospects of getting a job after you leave government or vice versa that can lead to personally lucrative situations that make it so that often these agencies will have similar incentives to the people that they're trying to regulate. And it's a tough nut to crack because in a lot of areas, there's specialization, there's an expertise that really only comes from working within that industry. So the only people who are good at regulating it are people who have worked in it. But again, that means that it's hard to avoid this regulatory capture phenomenon. There are lots of other interesting public choice topics, but in our short time together today, we've actually covered the median voter theorem. That is similar to our ice cream thing. We haven't given it that name yet, but it's the idea that if you're toward the middle, that's going to give you the best chance of capturing as many votes as possible. And we've talked about regulatory capture, another big topic within this public choice realm. There's a lot more interesting stuff. I'm happy to point you to additional resources, but we're going to leave it there for now. You'll see a couple questions related to this on the final exam, and if you have questions beyond what I covered today, let me know.